Are we
All
live yet?
right. Hello, everybody. We have
Hi
people
there.
joining us. Yay, amazing, amazing. So we have just a few minutes before we get started. In the meantime, I would love for all of you to say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. Maybe if you have an intention for this event today. And yeah, I'd love to know a little bit about you. And just to get this out there for now, we will be recording this. So this will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel where you can get access to it after the event. And also we will have time for a 10 to 15 minute Q&A, depending on how much time we have left. But we will make sure to answer your questions towards the end. So you can put any questions that you have in the chat, and then I'll make sure to come back and get to those towards the end. All right.
Yay.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah, welcome everyone.
County Durham, June 16. Hey, that's my birthday, June 16. Hello from Texas. Hello from Ireland. Very exciting. All right.
Yay.
So, South Wales, Carmel, Indiana, Milwaukee. Hi, everybody.
Wow. So multinational, amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people actually come. It's from all
Isn't
places
it?
in the world, all around the world.
Yeah, it's magic.
It,
Thanks to the internet.
thanks to the internet. And all right, Birmingham, UK, California, Michigan, New York, Bristol. Amazing.
Yay, shout out to California. I used to live there.
All right, great. Okay, so I am just going to go ahead and kind of just get started introducing myself to all of you guys. If you're new to coming to these events, hello, my name is Nadia, and I'm the founder and CEO of Zaya. And Zaya is a platform that helps to connect people who have chronic health conditions in finding highly personalized holistic care with practitioners that truly believe in the philosophy of the mind-body connection. And so something that I've been doing is building a community by having events and workshops such as this one every month, and really giving you guys a platform to really get educated on these topics. And recently, over the past few months, actually, so some of you may have, if you're part of our mailing list, you will be aware of this, but we've been building a booking platform where people can find and book practitioners. So it's a really, really easy way to find practitioners that sometimes you have to constantly be Googling for, or you have to get from a friend or another, your colleague, and sometimes it can get really frustrating. And so we've been building a platform to help you get access to that. And so I'm really, really excited to announce that I'm giving all of you the first sneak peek into the platform, where you'll be able to book a direct session with our guest speaker, Janine Alonzo, who is a naturopath and herbalist, and I'll talk about her a little bit later. But you'll be able to book a session with her directly and kind of just play around with it and let us know what you think about the profile and the platform and how it's going so far. So if you're interested in doing that at any point, if you'd like to book a session with our guest speaker, Janine, the link is actually in the description below, but I can also pop the link in the chat here, and you can visit it there, take a look, and let me know what you think. All right. And again, I'm going to say this. We will leave 15 minutes for a Q&A towards the end. And then also this will be recorded and you'll be able to watch it again on our YouTube channel. There will also be a Spotify and an iTunes link as well. So you can listen to our podcast, which is called Beyond Modern Medicine. And you can also access it on our website under the podcast page. All right. So let's just jump in. I'm going to stop talking, but first I'd like to introduce Janine. So Janine is a naturopath who specializes in herbalism, gut, and hormonal health. And through her own health journey, she came to realize that in order to heal, you have to be in a restful state. Janine's focus is to empower patients to understand how to do this in their day-to-day life so their hormones can balance, their energy levels increase, and they feel less anxious. Janine sees patients in Berlin or online, where she offers holistic consultations, combining her knowledge in traditional Western herbalism and modern testing such as hair mineral analysis, hormone profiling, and microbiome tests. And another thing that I really want to say is Janine is actually my naturopath, and I have seen her a few times to address a lot of my hormonal imbalances. I have endometriosis, and she really helped me with balancing the hormones after having my laparoscopy surgery. I was having hot flashes and insomnia. I couldn't sleep, and she knew exactly which herbs and supplements to recommend me. And honestly, I couldn't recommend her enough. So, and that may be a little bit of a biased opinion, but she's incredible. So I'm so excited to bring you onto this event today. Thank you so much for joining me, Janine. I'd love for us to just get started with you telling me a little bit about how you got started in being a naturopath and the journey that you've been on yourself.
Yeah, I would love to. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this warm welcome, Nadeya. And I think it's an amazing idea to create this community and this platform where people can come together and access all this information about health and and connect this way. So yeah, my name is Janine Alonzo, as you already mentioned. I'm a naturopath, or I would also call myself a holistic healer. I'm based in Berlin, and in Germany we call my profession a Heilpraktiker. And I would say my expertise is kind of merging traditional healing modalities like herbalism with modern techniques and science. So I do a lot of testing. I do lab work, also nutritional. Like I have a nutritional approach, and I also do infusion therapies. And I think, merging these things, it's like a really holistic approach. And that way, from my experience, I was able to help most of my patients. And yeah, I love doing that. And maybe what's also interesting for your listeners would be to hear how I got on this path. As I feel most healers, it's from our own health struggles. And I was diagnosed as a young adult, actually as a teenager, with hypertension, so high blood pressure. And I also had like all these digestive issues, which even like back then, I didn't even think I had issues, which is really crazy. I think lots of people, they're not even aware that their gut health is actually not ideal. And I had cystic acne and like really bad mood swings. And I just thought it's like normal. But then when I got this diagnosis of hypertension, and the doctor said, like, this is serious and you have to take all this medication for the rest of your life. And I was like 16. And that's just the way it is. And it's your genes. And there you go. And yeah, it just didn't stick well with me. And I didn't accept the fact that I would have to do that. And I went on a health journey where I started with nutrition, just went really like a clean diet. And I got all the books and, all the knowledge I was able to access back then, and reached out to healers myself who helped me help myself. And I think that that's a really important approach. I also think as practitioners that I think I'm not there to help people get healthy. I'm just there to empower people to help themselves. And that's basically what happened to me. And and then during my training, I explored all these different modalities like herbalism, healing with plants, and all the testing you can do. And just by like diet, lifestyle, and definitely our emotional and spiritual well-being you can't separate all these modalities, like all these factors. And that's how I got here. And I love talking about all these things. And I hope that your listeners can benefit a little bit of it. And if you have any questions, if anything is unclear, maybe because of my accent or something, you have the chance to ask in in the end of this interview. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for that intro. It's really interesting. I feel like what you just shared, that's such a common journey for so many people. And also this, I even just see in the chat, some people are talking about skin conditions, and that's something that you said that you were struggling with as well. And I love how you talk about, it's really about not treating, but it's empowering people. And I think that's what's really great about whole person care, when you have practitioners who are really mindful about the treatment plans and the therapy plans that they're creating. So something that I really want to talk about is, so the topic is balancing hormones, stress, and gut health. And I think the first thing that I'd love to talk about is stress itself. Because stress is something that really impacts our bodies, and it can really impact our minds. And eventually we can fall into this sort of chronic bubble of so many different diseases, which can all, if you trace them back, can contribute back to stress. And so I'd love to get your thoughts around how stress really impacts our bodies, and what are some of the signs and the symptoms that you can see, and what happens physiologically in the body when someone's experiencing stress.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's one of the most important topics in our Western world, because it does have an impact on gut health and hormonal health, everything. I think, first of all, it's good to define what is stress. And for me, stress is how we perceive our environment, because one person perceives a situation as tolerable as the other one would get into a fight or flight response. And so I think that indicates that it's a lot in our own hands, how we deal with stress. And I think that there is a lot of kind of healing to do also from the past, kind of inner child healing, if we get like these really strong responses. But then our gut health, for example, is also depending on our microbiome, which is all the bacteria that is in our gut, basically. There are studies that show that depending how it's populated, we respond differently to stress. But also vice versa. So if we're stressed, we actually can wipe out a lot of the good bacteria in our gut. So I think it's like either way, it's so important that we incorporate practices in our day-to-day life, how to de-stress and ground ourselves, because we are in such a high-paced, very yin, in like energetically speaking, lifestyle in the Western world. So maybe I can get more into like the physical impacts and the signs you could have from stress, and then I can talk about some like advice I have that can be implemented. So yeah, when we like looking at the gut, it could be that we react with acid reflux, that we don't, we can't digest well. Let's see, it's basically when we, like the stress hormone cortisol, or if we're in a life-threatening situation, all the blood that is supposed to go to our digestive tract to digest, and that actually takes a lot of energy. It actually goes to the brain and to the skeletal muscles, because if we run from like a saber-toothed tiger, we don't need to digest. So our digestion will stop, the mucus production will also stop, and also the layer of our gut will thinnen. And this is a very important mechanism for survival, but long term, it's not sustainable. And our gut will actually send signals, because we have this gut-brain connection. It goes both ways. It's a feedback loop. And it'll send signals to our brain saying, like, I'm not putting up with this anymore. and that could show in fatigue, in loss of appetite, and like these moodiness. So that has an effect on our mood as well. And diarrhea, that's also a sign, depending on your constitution. And when it comes to the endocrine system, stress is so where the stress hormones are being produced is, we have the master of the hormones is the hypothalamus, and that's in our brain. But that sends these hormones, the releasing or inhibiting hormones, to the other hormonal glands. And so it's releasing hormones to our adrenal glands, and they release either cortisol or adrenaline. And cortisol actually inhibits thyroid hormones. So the thyroid hormone production, or even like the conversion of thyroid hormones to active thyroid hormones. So the adrenals have an effect on the thyroid, and the thyroid hormones are there for our whole metabolism. So we lose concentration, we get cold, we get irritable, we get sleepy, maybe dry skin, thinning hair, losing hair. Like these can all be symptoms of chronic stress. Yeah. And also gaining weight, because we're in a fight or flight situation. So our body just tries to store fat as much as possible. We just, So those are the common symptoms.
Yeah. Wow. And so something that you spoke on is the microbiome or microbes. Could you explain a little bit what that is for some who may?
I'd love to. It's like my favorite topic to talk about these little guys. So microbes are also microorganisms. They're basically little creatures that have their own cells, which is important because it means they have their own metabolism. And it could be bacteria, it could be yeast, it could be fungi. They're like others, but we can't see them with our very eye, which is actually good, because if we think of it, we have, I think, 10 to 100 times more microorganisms in and on us than we have human cells. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
I think it's so fascinating. So if you would see that, you wouldn't be able to see me, because I would just be, this big ball of microorganisms probably. And they do have, like I mentioned, they have their own metabolism. And so they do produce certain things like our microbiome. So that means they're the ones that are in our digestive tract. They produce vitamin K, for example, biotin, or folic acid. And they also decompose things. But on the other hand, they can also produce toxins. So we always want to keep our microorganisms in a nice balance. Even with yeast and fungi, you probably heard of Candida albicans. We have that kind of yeast, like all of us, we have it in us. It's just about the amount, the balance. And if we feed the so-called good guys, like the good bacteria, then that way, like the fungi and the bad bacteria, they won't grow more. It's really just about having like this inner ecosystem that is balanced, and making sure we feed the good ones that have like the good metabolites for us. And so that's how I would describe microorganisms.
Yeah. And so if you were to, like, what is something that doesn't respond, that the microbes don't respond well to?
I would say that like the certain species of bacteria in our gut that we don't want to have too much of, like E. coli, for example, we want to have some of them, they're important, but like not too many. They do really like starchy, sugary foods. So, and processed foods. And also like stress really wipes out the good ones, the ones that will make us feel good. And then like the ones that that remain are usually the ones that cause issues.
Okay.
And we do want to feed the good ones with lots of fiber, plant-based foods, healthy, like omega-3 kinds of fats, and like fibers and maybe some fermented foods,
Yeah.
depending, of course, on if you have a histamine intolerance, then you can't do the fermented. Those are all just like very broad suggestions, but in general, that works really well. I like to compare it with like an inner rainforest. So we want to have a really big variety of species, and we want to be like our inner gardeners. So we want to feed it and making sure it's like all growing, and we're like,
I like
just
that. I
kind
like
of,
that visual for our inner
Mhm.
garden.
Yeah.
So I think that there's so much evidence out there about how microorganisms in the gut can really influence mental health, and
Yeah.
also where the gut and the microbiome are always communicating with the brain, and conversely, the brain is always communicating with the gut and the microbiome. So what exactly is happening here? But something that I really want to go down into even more is how the microbiome affects our mood, how it affects our mental health. Because I know we've mentioned a
Yeah.
few things about how it affects our physical health, but what's happening mentally?
Yeah. One important aspect, which I'm sure your audience already all have heard of, is the vagus nerve, which basically, like, that's the fastest and most direct pathway to communicate from the brain to the gut, and it runs like through our diaphragm between the lungs, up the esophagus, and then up the neck into our brain. And that is like the pathway that communicates from the brain to the gut. And there have been lots of like studies done on how the vagus nerve also really can enhance our mood, makes us more relaxed. And I think one of the most effective ways is to breathe, because I think it's the diaphragm that we're moving by deep breathing. So like a long inhale and like an even longer exhale. And you can already feel how relaxing that is. And I think this is the effect of the vagus nerve, which is fascinating. And when you were talking about like how it has like this mood altering, or like the effects on the mood, the microbiome, there is this one experiment that came to mind for me, which they actually, I think it was like a scientist from Norway, and they did it back in like 2011 or so. So that was when they first started exploring the effects on the mood. And they were doing it with mice, which I don't approve, but I still want to talk about it because it's a good example on how effective a microbiome is on the mood. And they put the mice or the mouse in a little container of water where it couldn't touch the ground with its feet. So it had to swim. Yeah, I know. It breaks my heart. Yeah. And so it's basically they were measuring how long it would swim to get to like safe lands, how big the motivation is for it, basically. And they were actually originally doing it to test different antidepressants. So the better it works, the longer they would swim. And then these scientists, or some of these scientists, they actually gave these mice certain lactobacilli bacteria. So half of them they gave those, and the other half they didn't give them any. And the ones who actually received these bacteria, these good gut bacteria, they were swimming much longer and much more motivated. And also they found in their blood way less stress hormones, which I think is also interesting. So it's like, you can see like it's like the gut, brain, and endocrine system connection as well. And they even did tests on like their memory, which also was enhanced compared to the group that didn't get the bacteria. Yeah,
Wow.
and also like you can see it in brain scans. So we have different parts of the brain that are responsible for different areas. So the vagus nerve, or like the gut-brain connection, it has effects on the hippocampus, which is the memory, responsible for the memory, for the limbic brain, which is kind of like this fight or flight response, and for the what was it called? I forgot, but it's basically like for self-awareness, like responsibility for self-awareness, for motivation, for happiness, and like self-reflection. And I'm not saying that our gut is doing all this, but it definitely has a really strong effect on it.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is so fascinating. That's so, so
Yeah,
fascinating.
isn't it?
So what happens? So leaky gut, can you explain what leaky gut is? Because I feel like it's one of those, is it an autoimmune?
No, it isn't.
It's not, but
Uh-uh.
it's a very common uh
Totally. And it's in
condition
everyone's
that's
mouth.
common.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Can you explain? I've always been really curious about exactly what leaky gut is and how that
Yeah.
kind of plays into all of this.
Yeah. So our gut is lined with this really thin wall, which at first glance doesn't make sense because our gut is like the one portal where things from the outside enter. So you would think that it should have this really big protection wall, but it's lined with this thin wall because it's semi-permeable, meaning that it's supposed to leak certain nutrients out that are already digested enough so they get into the bloodstream. The thing is that through our lifestyle, like stress makes it more permeable, meaning it's
Mm.
it's lined with these called tight junctions that you can like imagine like they're like this. And then when they're leaving out compounds, like they're opening up a little bit. And that's regulated by certain, like there's this messenger protein called zonulin. And
Mhm.
with that protein, like you can get a test, you can get it measured, and the higher these levels are, the more likely you have leaky gut. And so stress makes it more leaky, like opening up more. But also medications like painkillers, antibiotics, gluten is also very like linked to it.
Yeah.
Which I think there are studies out of Harvard even where it's saying that basically everyone gets a kind of like leaky gut because when you eat gluten, this messenger protein gets released and the tight junctions open up. And for some people, it's fine. It can get repaired again and then again. But then sometimes there's this one point where it's just too much. And then other stressors and factors come in as well. And then they get a reaction from the immune system. Because if you have a leaky gut, it basically means that then compounds that are in your digestive tract, they leak out into the bloodstream that are not supposed to be there. They're supposed to go more like lower so they can get broken down more and then get digested into another way, like through the liver and then, being used by the body.
Mm.
And if they get into the bloodstream, it means that your immune system will react to it. And that could show, that's probably what you meant with an autoimmune disease, because this could actually cause a lot of autoimmune diseases. Let's say if compounds get leaked out, and then your immune system eventually, let's say if it's like a gluten molecule, and it sees it and your immune system and it attacks it, because I think like 80% of our immune system lays around the gut, which totally makes sense because of what I already mentioned, that like things from the outside world get really like, in us. And so there has to be this layer of protection by the immune system. But if it keeps seeing these gluten molecules and it attacks it, and at one point it might, because of the overstimulation, then mistakenly think it might be like like your thyroid might be reminding it of the gluten molecule, then it starts attacking the thyroid. That's actually a pretty strong connection between like leaky gut and gluten sensitivity, it's called. These kind of immune reactions, and that's mostly the cause by leaky gut, and thyroid diseases like Hashimoto's. And yeah, I hope that was clear enough.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was very clear. What exactly would be the treatment or the therapy plan for someone who has leaky gut?
Yeah. So first of all, I would do a gut flora test or a stool test to see how, like, to measure these markers like zonulin and maybe like inflammation markers, to see how the whole microbiome is. So the flora, the whole balance of it. And I would probably also do a food sensitivity test to see what kinds of foods your body, because of the leaky gut, is already being allergic to. It's not like a immediate allergy, but it's those kind of sensitivities where your body reacts to it in a subtle way. Could be a headache, could be skin rashes, could be joint aches, and also not like an immediate reaction in terms of time. It could be maybe an egg you ate 3 days before. So it's good to do this testing and then cut out these foods for, I would say, 6 months. And then at the same time, because then you're giving the body some rest to restore. If you don't introduce, or if you don't have all these like immune inflammatory foods again, and then doing like a gut restoration, meaning like repairing, like like with foods, you can do a lot, like fiber-rich foods, and there are certain amino acids like L-glutamine that can really help repair the gut lining. And just doing that, leaving out these stressors for 6 months, and then testing again, and then you can actually slowly introduce these things again, which for some people, they're like really shocked then when they say like, oh, but these are all the foods I like eating. It's like, yeah, it's because you're having a leaky gut and all of them are leaking out, and that's why the immune system reacts to them. But you can eat them again eventually. You just have to restore the gut wall. Yeah. And healthy fats is also important.
Amazing. Thank you so much for explaining that. So I also want to jump into hormones. And I think that something that I'd love to talk about is what are the signs and the symptoms of an hormonal imbalance? I think that so many women are experiencing multiple symptoms, and it's not until they actually finally get tested that they see that there is a hormonal imbalance. So what are some of the ways that people can start to recognize that there may be a hormonal imbalance happening for them?
Yeah, it has many, many faces, but since we're talking about women, it's definitely symptoms that can be related to the menstrual cycle. So it could be tender swollen breasts, moodiness, anything related to PMS, which I know it's like a really wide spectrum, like so many symptoms, like irritability, bloating, diarrhea, like like a depressed mood, also really heavy cramping. That's something, unfortunately, some women think it's just normal, but it's not. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. If you balance your hormones, then it can really be not painful. And but on the side note, I think it's also, as women, it's important to kind of honor this menstrual cycle, and to maybe even use that cycle to adapt your life a little bit around it. Because if you have your menstruation, maybe it is a good time to actually kind of go inward and reflect and honor this time and kind of rest a little bit more. But in our society, that's not really being honored or seen. So I think it's important as women to pay attention to that and like honor that, and actually see it as a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Can you still hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because the internet.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Perfect. So this could be like hormonal imbalances. Yeah, maybe also hot flashes if it's like on the other side of not having enough hormones. But could also be things testosterone related. So if you have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, it could be that you have like facial hair growing or hair on parts of your body where you don't want to have it, and maybe hair falling out. Yeah, like all these symptoms, I would say, can be related to like female, like sex hormones. And then, yeah, there are
No,
like also the thyroid and adrenal hormones, but it's all so interconnected. So if you constantly having high stress hormones, it does affect your reproductive hormonal glands as well, and your thyroid hormones. So I think it's important to look at the whole adrenal, thyroid, and reproductive hormone axis.
yeah.
Because they all like talk to each other.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. I feel like there was a point in my life when I was experiencing the most stress. That was the exact moment that I started recognizing that I started having the sort of hormonal imbalance. It's because I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't eating well. Also, environment. I think environment has a really big impact on that as well. I mean, I was living in Bali, and they're constantly burning plastic there. At least in the rice fields where I was living. And so I really feel like my body was, and then also being on the scooter all the time, you're constantly taking in all of these different toxicities. And I feel like that really impacted my health. So what is it, I know that some people try to make a lot of changes in their diet, but also what about their environment as well? What are some of the changes that people can make in their lives to kind of start regulating their body back into coming into this more homeostasis?
Since you're already talking about plastic, I think that that's a really good point, because there are so many compounds in plastic, like PBA and like, this, what you're hearing, like you probably already heard about, that do actually work just as estrogens. And they just sit on the estrogen receptors on the cells, and they lead to estrogen dominance. The same thing with cosmetic products. There's so many like artificial compounds in it that act as estrogen. So that's why lots of women are having these symptoms around their menstrual cycle, like the cramping, of the moodiness. And I think it's most like a lot, even men, because I mean, they're exposed to the plastic too. And the tap water also has a lot of estrogens in it too, because of the birth control and organizing. That's something we consume every day, like a filter that filters out hormones as well, and medications. And really making sure you're getting very clean cosmetic products, where I usually suggest, like, if you can't eat it, I wouldn't put it on my skin, to go with that. And stress is very much also affecting your hormones, and it causes estrogen dominance as well. And making sure you get a very stable blood sugar as well, proteins throughout the day, and so you don't get these blood sugar spikes, because that also cycle, and therefore the high. What else? Getting good sleep and supporting your liver, because if you get good sleep, that just resets your whole hormonal system. So it really comes down to the basics: clean water, good sleep,
Mm.
low stress, and clean foods. And the role the liver plays that maybe not everyone is aware of, but the liver metabolizes and like all these hormones as well. And if the liver is strained too much by all these other environmental factors, as like it could be alcohol, it could be, you know, like, yeah, processed foods, it could even be something you're not aware of, like heavy metals that you at one point um, have and you're not aware of, that could be like stored in the liver and inhibits the function of it. So I'm a big fan of like bitter herbs and bitter foods. They're not like a whole lot out there because that's actually been something that they yeah, like the food industry, like bitters are not that popular. So like we used to have much more bitters in our greens and foods, but I am really I think that we should go back to eating bitters. That could be in arugula, for example, or chicory. You know, chicory is like that kind of salad. But also just having a good bitter like dandelion tea or dandelion salad in the mornings, or like there are other kind of like herbal teas or tinctures, like this a Swedish bitter tincture is like a very well known kind of mix of herbs, and just having that in the morning and maybe even before every meal, that really helps the liver to detoxify hormones and toxins in general, and it helps with digestion because it really helps with the acid production in your tummy, and so it'll help break down food things. So that's a really I think everyone would benefit from having
Yeah.
these bitters.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you know, it's interesting because
I okay, but it just like I think the picture froze, but
yeah, the connection isn't that great right now. Not sure what's happening. But it's okay right now. Um, no, but something that when I was doing some research, it seems like detoxing the liver, there's a lot of kind of controversy around it. Some people say it's impossible to detox the liver, and some people say you can detox the liver.
yeah,
But no,
I guess it's supporting the liver,
mm,
basically, just yeah, to support the liver. Yeah. Mm.
yeah, because the liver already detoxes. So
Exactly. Yeah.
support it.
Yeah. And I mean, also supporting by trying to cut out all the, the toxins in your environment, like the things you and I mentioned, like, yeah, to give it
Yeah.
the chance to break down all these excess hormones and, mm,
Yeah. You know, I'm curious, why is it that women seem to have, and maybe I could be wrong, but it seems like hormonal issues are a lot more common in women than they are in men. Why exactly is that?
it's because we naturally, hmm, well, we do produce much more hormones than men. Men are usually in this kind of daily cycle that is just like daytime, nighttime related, which we're also in with melatonin and serotonin. But we as women, we have, estrogen, we have progesterone, um, and I think then the excess of estrogen makes it much more visible for us to have. But men actually also experience that. I think in general, maybe men are less verbal about it, but I've definitely seen lots of men with estrogen dominance as well.
Oh,
Mm,
okay. Okay.
yeah.
Interesting.
Mm.
So then another question I have is around just the immune system
Mhm.
and supporting the immune system. What are some of your suggestions around that?
Yeah. First of all, for me, I usually like to say to modulate the immune system, because boosting the immune system, which would probably would mean that to just make it more reactive. For some people, that's actually not a good idea. Who, for example, have very inflammatory things going on or autoimmune diseases. And like, yeah, to modulate the immune system for me would be definitely to start with the gut, because otherwise, because of a leaky gut, the immune system is constantly, exposed to things it has to deal with, and it ends up in this chronic inflammation. And then, yeah, all in all, I mean, there are like definitely certain herbs and plants that are very good for the immune system. That I can, it's just hard to like generally recommend that. Like Echinacea, for example, is like the one go-to if you have like a really weak immune system. And I would recommend if you have something like very acute. One amazing adaptogen I love, and that's something I would probably recommend generally to people, is Ashwagandha, the Indian adaptogen from this Ashwagandha root, because it's really supporting the immune system and the nervous system and the gut in a very like gentle, supportive, juicy way without over exciting it. So I think that's a good thing. And just yeah, it sounds like I'm repeating myself, because it really comes down to stress as well, because stress inhibits the immune system like so much as well, and like increases inflammation. And like really listening to your body and the signs of when it just needs like some rest, and making sure you get good sleep, and antioxidant rich diet, meaning with lots of like colorful veggies and fruits, and asking yourself how you can nourish your body, maybe instead of just thinking of nutrients and calories, and having like also a really, for me, healthy culture around food and eating means that you take your time eating, because then you also digest much better, because you're not under stress. You like honor like that time also with the company, like have eating in good company is important, making like the dinner table a stress-free zone. You automatically, because your digestion already starts in your mouth, and like chewing enough, and you will just break down all the nutrients much better and absorb everything much better. And therefore, that's also really essential for your immune system. Yeah, because 80% of the immune system is around the gut. So it really comes down to digestion again. Yeah.
No,
And of course, yeah. And then there are like certain herbs and adaptogens, but I think that that's something very, very personalized, because I'm not a big, I don't think it's a good idea to take all these medical mushrooms without actually consulting someone who is knowledgeable about it, because it has been used as medicine and for a reason, and it's not for everyone. So the only one I would really say we in the Western world would benefit from is ashwagandha.
And I love your note about chewing really slowly. I spent some time in a Buddhist monastery in Thailand last year or the year before. And something that we had to do when we were there was, one, we would eat in silence. And then when we would chew, after each bite, we would take a bite, and then we'd put our fork down and we'd chew until it would become mush. And then after that, then we'd swallow, then we would take our next bite. And I mean, you can completely just feel the difference in your digestion, like the way that the food digests, and it's a lot easier for the body to.
And that's how we're supposed to do it. I think if everyone would just implement that, who's listening to this will already make a big change in their health.
Yeah. So I would love to take some time to answer some questions now.
Yeah.
Let's see in the chat. Someone asked, they want to know how your hormones can affect your skin.
Oh yeah, a lot, actually. Let's see, how should I put it? Like excess estrogens could definitely bring flare-ups. Also in terms of the liver, because then it's like too much of a burden for the liver to deal and break down all the estrogens. So then other compounds that it can't detoxify could then be detoxified through your skin. So it's actually just a mechanism of your skin to detoxify. It's one of the detoxifying organs with the kidneys, the lungs, and the liver. And also excess cortisol can cause flare-ups. And I think that that's because it inhibits the immune system. And then there's just more inflammation because of that. Yeah. And also it can show in the skin for sure as well. Mm.
Another question we have is if you could advise on foods beneficial for nighttime to keep the body cool at night and to also minimize bloating. Good question.
Yeah. So the key to keep the body cool at night.
And
food.
to minimize bloating.
Yeah. Well, what immediately comes to mind since I'm an herbalist is sage. Sage is this herb. I mean, we all know it also from like incense. It smells amazing, but it's also something you can either use it culinarily in your food or you can drink it as a tea before nighttime. It's like very cooling and it's also hormone regulating. So that's nice. And then with the bloating, if the I would make sure that you chew enough and also that you don't like you can maybe experiment a little bit with eating cooked foods and not raw foods at night, because this might be a little bit too hard to digest on your digestive tract to break all of this down. And also making sure you have 2 to 3 hours before going to bed between your last meal and going to bed. Yeah. I hope that was helpful.
Another question, can you discuss the proper levels of gut microbiome at homeostasis for the average female individual?
Yeah, I mean, it's...
and then
yeah.
Sorry, there's also a follow-up question from that. And what is the point for the average individual where the threshold reached for the danger zone? So what is
that's a very complex question to answer because there's so many, like there's such a big variety of microbes of gut bacteria we are having. I would say that the ones that are like the most important strains, it depends also what you're testing for. But what I usually test for are the lactobacilli and the bifidus bacteria and E. coli. And so these should be, I don't really know like the percentage or numbers of it, but these should be like like the lactobacilli and the bifidum bacteria should be pretty high and the E. coli should be lower. And then there are some, I don't know how that's useful because I'm throwing out all these names, like Clostridium difficile, for example, is one that should be very low or barely there. So there are probably like 20 different ones. And I really have to look at all these different ones to tell. But I would say the most important ones are the bifidum bacteria and the lactobacilli, because they're responsible for for a acidic environment. Like the pH of the gut should be 6. And I think the pH would probably be also a good marker, because if you have a healthy pH of 6 in your gut, flora balance.
Okay. You broke off for a second, but you said the number was 6, right? For the pH. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Another question is, I have an underactive thyroid and struggle to lose weight. Which foods herbal diet is best for underactive thyroid?
Yeah, great question. I love talking about that. Well, definitely make sure, because it's so connected to your adrenal glands. So definitely make sure you're not overstraining your physical like body by over exercising, making sure you're doing more, like definitely move your body, but not anything that's too like straining on you. And then making sure that you eat healthy, lean, like healthy protein sources. So meaning you could eat legumes, or like they're really healthy vegan protein powders, or if you're not vegan, like collagen powders as well. You could eat sometimes maybe fish, depending on your, your diet and or your nutritional approach, and eat those in the mornings and in like for lunch, and then in the evenings making sure you eat complex carbohydrates, um, because that will actually, like your body will release more melatonin than in the evening, and it will help you to calm down. And making sure and this diet really helps you to balance your blood sugar also with the proteins, because if your blood sugar is, you have these blood sugar spikes, then automatically your body will get into a stress response, and you will release a lot of cortisol, and that will then as an effect downregulate your thyroid. So just as to wrap it up for you, making sure you have a stable blood sugar, and also like having practices to de-stress and not to overstrain your body.
Hmm. Another one is, could you, so many questions.
Yay! I could go on like this forever.
I love it. I love how passionate you are about it.
Yeah, I'm like really happy that people are so curious as well.
Yeah, yeah. Another question is, could you give advice for hypothyroid on food, drink, activity? I'm struggling for losing weight, nearly 10 pounds for months, and losing muscle as well.
Yeah, but that's basically the question that I answered
Yeah,
already,
that was
like
the one.
hypothyroidism and like low. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there are certain tests that you could also do. I mean, usually the doctor tests only for the TSH hormone, but there are certain tests that you could do to get like a really good idea of what's going on with your thyroid and why. But in general, I would definitely look at your like the stress thyroid axis. That
Mhm.
has a really big impact. Yeah.
Yeah, and if anybody is looking to do a test, Janine, you do offer that as well, and you also offer online consultations. So
Exactly.
if any of you would like to have a chat with her, book a session with her, I have the link again in the description. You'll be able to see which tests you can request to book with Janine as well. So, and you
Yeah.
can do that if you're in Berlin, you can see her in person, or if you're somewhere else in the world, you can do it online. Another question. My stress level is extremely high to the point that I see protein/muscles in my legs and my glutes gone. So I guess their muscles have reduced. How can I restore this issue? Please help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there is something called Cushing disease, that is actually a disease of if you have a constant high level of cortisol, then you lose bone mass, you lose muscle mass, you'll get belly fat around, yeah, like belly fat, and like all this like variety of symptoms. So it does sound like that's, I'm not saying you have Cushing disease, but this is could definitely be an indicator of chronic high cortisol. So I think, I mean, in your case, I would definitely recommend seeing a practitioner, because it seems like it's been pretty prolonged that you've been dealing with this. But all the things that I already mentioned with stabilizing the blood sugar, so your body is not in a constant fight or flight mode. Also finding like maybe therapists who could help you with like the emotional stress response, to see like meditation, therapy, EFT, like all these things. I think it's actually a really, really beautiful journey to explore, and like you'll gain so much for your life quality if you learn how to reduce stress. And like with diet, like I said, lowering the blood sugar, making sure you get good proteins. I would say for the adrenals, you can even have snacks in between meals, so you don't get into this low blood sugar mode. So maybe snacking on some like almonds that are high in protein, and berries and stuff. Making sure you don't have like sugary, starchy foods, and nothing processed. Just go back to the basics. And there are lots of like plants that you could actually have as teas that are really good for the adrenals, and like to really regulate your whole nervous system. But that's also something that is hard to just generally give advice to, because like, let's say something like passion flower is really good for the nervous system and for the adrenals, but it depends. Like I would prescribe that to someone who in a conversation I find out they wake up at 2 a.m. and then they have like these looping thoughts and they can't unwind. That's like an indicator for a passion flower, which I think it's beautiful, because the flower itself, when you picture it, it has these kind of spirals. So it represents like the looping thoughts. But then like chamomile, for example, would be also good, but that depends on your personality, on the exact symptoms. So yeah. But ashwagandha, you can definitely do in the mornings and at noon. I would recommend it, and that's when cortisol is the highest, not at night. Yeah.
Got it. Someone said they could listen to you all day.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I know we are at the end, but we do have a few more questions. If you're okay with answering them, Janine, is that okay?
Go for it.
Okay, cool. And thank you for everyone that's still on and listening.
Yeah.
Another question, someone has an issue with hair loss. Could you kind of explain a little bit around hair loss, and also maybe some sort of, I think it's very individualized, but any sort of thoughts that you have around that, and maybe any general advice?
Yeah, it could be related to the thyroid. So low thyroid hormones can cause hair loss. It could also be related to high testosterone. So you'd have to kind of just look what the symptoms, like what they indicate. So with the hair loss, if you also have really low energy and you have dry skin and brittle nails and you have problems concentrating, that would be an indication for low thyroid. If high testosterone, it would be that maybe you'll have breakouts, like so pimples, and like hair that usually, like hirsutismus, I think it's called, but hair where you as a woman don't want to have hair growing. And yeah, so these could be the reasons. Like from my experience, that's mostly what it is. These are one out of the two.
Thyroid.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's see. And then one other question, let me see. So I have PCOS and very thin lining. What herbs or food can I take?
PCOS. I hate, like I feel a little bit silly to repeat myself, but polycystic ovarian syndrome is very much linked to high insulin levels. So high insulin levels, like you have high insulin levels if you have these blood sugar spikes. So like all the things that I already mentioned to balance the blood sugar are good. Then there are certain herbs that help with high blood sugar levels. For example, cinnamon bark, and I think Chinese melon is also something that could help with that. But I usually use like cinnamon bark in my teas that I prescribe to balance the blood sugar. Um, yeah, so all in all, definitely making sure stable blood sugar and reducing stress. And yeah, I'm sure that there are like a ton more like herbal things that can be used. But yeah, cutting down caffeine as much as you can, and like using matcha, because that's very anti-inflammatory, but still gives you like this nice boost of energy, but it's more stable, like green tea. Mm, and yeah, that's what comes to mind.
You know, it's interesting because you say you hate repeating yourself, but I
Yeah,
always feel like it always comes back to the same thing
that's
anyway,
true.
you
Yeah.
know? And something that I
Mm,
always ask the practitioners when they're on here is, what do you believe is the root cause of disease? And actually,
yeah.
I'd love to ask you that question as we close this out. What is your thought?
Well, I think it's already in the word dis-ease. We're out of balance. And
Mm,
I think it's like such a beautiful thing. We just need to listen to our body. It speaks to us. And the symptoms it shows, it's actually indicates what is out of balance.
mm,
And the physical symptoms, they're just basically the tip of the iceberg. There are all these factors that when they're getting out of balance, that's like the very last thing to show. So it could be our creative life, fulfilling job, family life, social life, beautiful like sex life, all these like things, areas in our life, when they're out of balance, at the very top, it shows as a physical symptom. So yeah,
mm.
we just need to be detectives and enjoy the journey to investigate and really take the time to listen to our bodies.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. If I could offer any advice to anybody, it's to slow down and
Yeah.
listen to your body, because your body will tell you exactly what you need, exactly what's wrong, and yeah, and how to heal. So, yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
yeah, and if you would like to book a session with Janine, I just popped the link to do that in the chat. And then also, if you'd like to visit Janine's website, her new beautiful website, and also her Instagram, that's also in the description, but I also put the link as well in the chat, so you can do that. And if you'd like, you can join our next meditation and mindfulness circle on July 14th. Which will take place at 7 p.m. London time or 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we'll have a trauma and stress counselor and interfaith Buddhist chaplain Rick Center leading our monthly meditation and mindfulness circles, and he'll be talking about nourishing the good heart. And we'll also be having a nice meditation and group discussion. Those are a lot more intimate, and those will be happening on Zoom as well. And then also, speaking of stress, on August 12th, I'll be interviewing Dr. Sophia DeBar, and she is a GP, a London-based GP who specializes in neuroscience, and she will be speaking about the neuroscience of stress and stress-related disease. So that will be really interesting, as well as that's very similar in the topic that we were speaking about today. So if you'd like to go and check that out, you can visit that at our website at zayamed.com, and then it would be /events. And then that should also be in the description as well, where you can go and see that. So thank you so much, Janine. Anything else? Any final words before we end this?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this talk, and thank you so much, all the listeners, to hang in there for this long and be so curious. And yeah, I'm really happy to be part of this community. And yeah, one thing I want to mention is that in Berlin, I use this space. It's called Joy Space, and it's
Yeah.
also a really beautiful collective of healers. They do all kinds of different work, and I also love that community. And you can also check them out. It's, I think, joyspace.de. But it's also in my, like on my website and on my Instagram. And yeah, you can check them out as well. It's definitely on the same page.
Yeah, I just put the link for Joy Space. It's a beautiful space. If you're in Berlin, you should definitely check it out. They have lots of pretty people there. It's beautiful. All right. Thank you everyone so much. And I hope to see you at our next meditation and mindfulness circle on July 14th. And if not, we'll see you at the one in August 12th. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.